Okay. In recognition of Women History Month, the prelude and the offertory were written by women, and they're pieces from the hymnal. The first one, the prelude, is A Promise Through the Ages Rings, written by Alicia Carpenter. And the offertory is Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky, written by Grace Lewis McLaren. So these are in the hymnal, great hymns written by women composers.
Can you hear me now? Thank you, Bruce, for our uplifting hymn. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation here in Stuart, Florida. Today is March 28th, 2021. My name is Pam Corbin, and I will be your worship associate today. And a big thanks for those who helped with the service. Bruce Ruby, our music director, our Zoom host, Corina Pelloni, and our backup host, Janet Grote. We will mute everyone to avoid any noise in the background. Please remain muted. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all genders, races, ages, and backgrounds. Let me repeat that. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. Thank you for being with us today. We hold Zoom services every Sunday at 11 a.m. To be put on our mailing list or to our email list or to find more information about us, go to our website at tcuuc.org. You'll get announcements in our Friday online newsletter and a midweek follow-up from the sermon. Please stay for our annual meeting. We will have the nomination of our board members and our annual reports. It's important to have all of you there. Bob will light the chalice in the sanctuary. The chalice lighting words come from Lisa Doge, chalice lighting for challenging times. I want to remind everybody that COVID-19 is a challenging time. Abdul Sattar Rahimi, the Deputy Director for the Farah Provincial Council, holds his prayer beads during a ribbon cutting ceremony March 8, 2010 in Farah, Afghanistan. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It is the cup of life, we answer. a cup of blessings overflowing, a cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of wine for celebration and dedication, the flame of truth, the fire of purification, oil for anointing, healing, out of chaos, fear and horror. Thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home. We're going to go to our opening words. Palm Sunday is part of the Jesus Passover story. A week before his death, Palm Sunday. So I chose these words because Jesus has a lot of people that emulate him and people that we didn't think emulated him. And their stories are so similar. What is the relationship between Jesus and other heroes? Palm Sunday is part of the Jesus Passover story, a week before his death. And for me, what stands out is that the story of Jesus in the weeks before his death have several different meanings. Remember that Jesus has just been thrown out of has just thrown out the merchants and the money lenders in the temple in Jerusalem. This would be like having a supermarket in church. People were coming to the temple from having traveled long distances, and they were going to sacrifice animals for Passover. Merchants had set up shop in the temple setting and with goods for this holiday. So Jesus was appalled at the inflated prices and profits that people were making on the backs of the pilgrims. Okay, so they came to the temple, they were going to sacrifice their animals for Passover, and they inflated the prices. So Jesus called these people, the merchants that were set up in the temple, he called them thieves. He threw the merchants out, he overturned their tables, and they saw loss of income and conspired to have him killed. Jesus felt that the temple should be used for purely religious teachings and healings, and those teachings were treat others the way you want to be treated. Love thy neighbor, the golden rule, that people in church or the temple should be talking about what happens after death, the timing of prayers, the paying of taxes to the Roman authorities. Jesus definitely rocked the boat, the dignified Better Business Bureau of his time. He was the Ralph Nader. He defied the business and religious habits of the time, made people feel that they would lose their jobs. Remember, if you had set up a business and you didn't like what Jesus had to say, you saw a loss of income. They knew that they would lose their power, and Jesus knew that he would run into serious opposition. He did it anyway, and he knew he was going to die. He and the disciples had the Seder. He warned his friends that he would be betrayed. He was arrested with the help of Judas and then crucified. That Jesus had several principles which Unitarians follow. The story of his life and death sounds so familiar. Fighting for your convictions, making principles your top priority, knowing that you could die for your beliefs. Remember Dr. King's mountaintop, Gandhi's nonviolence movement in India and South Africa, and the assassinations that followed. So this Palm Sunday is the beginning of the end for Jesus. But Jesus was a warrior for truth and respect. Our music director will play and sing hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. It's out of sync for music, so mute yourself and do sing joyfully.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the morning. Praise for the morning. Praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rays do fall, sunlight from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first breath. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, strong in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, even so plain. Praise within nation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
From all that dwell beyond the skies, let faith and hope and arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung. From every land, by every tongue. Amen.
Well, I apologize for trying to steal the show prematurely. I always get a little nervous and we jump the gun a little bit. So today's time for all ages. I want to take this opportunity to discuss a very serious topic. And since Reverend Bob will be doing the time for all ages for Easter Sunday, this Sunday is my opportunity to address the origins of the egg-laying rabbit, which I know is something that's been on everybody's mind ever since Easter became a blip on the 2021 screen. So, what are they? What are the origins of the egg-laying rabbit? So, Easter is the Christian celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So, it's easy to ask, where do bunnies come into play, especially ones that lay eggs? And the precise origins of the Easter bunny are shrouded in the mists of time. There are at least two opposing schools of thought on the subject. In one camp, the credit for the Easter bunny is given to the pagan cultures of Western Europe, but some Catholics are also eager to claim the bunny as their own. Let's look at both sides. That the symbol of the rabbit springs from pagan tradition is popular theory. Yoster was a Germanic goddess of fertility, whose symbolic animal was the bunny rabbit, and springtime in pagan Western Europe was celebrated with a festival in her honor. Rabbits are known for breeding energetically, and this does make them a fairly obvious symbol of fertility, and they do it in the springtime, and that ties those two concepts together, fertility and springtime, going hand in hand. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, the Catholic claim to the Easter Bunny is somewhat related to this. Once upon a time, we're going way back here, the Greeks and the Romans believed that rabbits produced asexually. As virgins, they reproduced as virgins. Due to the persistence of this belief into the medieval times, rabbits became somewhat ironically associated with the Virgin Mary, with whom they appeared to have something in common at the time. So we do know that German Protestant settlers were responsible for bringing the Easter Bunny to American soil in the 1700s. By then, the bunny was already laying eggs. So where did the eggs come in? Well, the pagan version of the story may be as simple as a perennial association between eggs and newly emerging life. And Christians have also used the egg as a symbol of the resurrection of Jesus. In Catholic history specifically, the eggs have a long time association with Lent and with breaking Lenten fast. So these are legitimate claims to the origin of the bunny and his eggs. His eggs. We need to question that choice of pronoun, right? Yeah, especially as you use. But just maybe, as human beings, we have much in common despite differing traditions, cultural and religious. And therefore, we tend to gravitate towards similar symbols, justifying their significance with our own stories. So what is the truth? You'll have to decide or decide to not decide. But springtime, resurrection, rebirth, new chances, egg-laying rabbits that deliver tasty confections, these are things that people like. Well, I'm more personally of a heathen than a Christian, and I tend to cast my lot with the former. I will not contest the claims of other traditions to the Easter Bunny. Who wouldn't want a visit from him? So thank you, and now it's time for Joys and Sorrows. So we're going back to Pam and Reverend Bob.
Let us share our joys and sorrows. I will move a stone in our symbolic river to mark each joy and sorrow. Please keep your joys and sorrows brief. Raise your hand to share, and we will unmute you to speak. For those of you with joys and sorrows that are too private to share, know that our hearts are with you.
I thought this reading put life into perspective by Richard M. Fuchs. We lift up our hearts in thanks for the sun and the dawn which we did not create, for the moon and the evening which we did not make, for food which we plant but cannot grow, for friends and loved ones we have not earned and cannot buy, for this gathered community which welcomes us as we are from wherever we have come, for all our free churches that keep us human and encourage us in our quest for beauty, truth, and love, for all these things which come to us as gifts of being from sources beyond ourselves, gifts of life and love and friendship. We lift up our hearts in thanks this day. Richard Fuchs. Moments of silence. The offertory is a standard church practice to invite the congregation members and friends to reflect on their love and support of the congregation and the possibility of growing in their giving. We need all of us to grow in our giving. Contact information is printed in the virtual bulletin. Now Bruce will play the offertory. The church lives by a rich tradition that sustains us. This congregation continues by your generosity, and we thank you. This video that's next is one you'll recognize. We hope all of us leave our worship experience feeling raised up, and this does it for me, and I trust for you. Thank you, Corina. I want to read these two poems of Regina Lupu. The first is entitled Mistaken Identity. Old woman, I turn my back on you. I shut my eyes to your parched skin, your sagging, withered flesh. I see none of you. You are not I. You are my shell, my outer shell of flame, that's I, of joy, of love, that's I, of pride, of yearning, all that's I. You will not drag me down with your decay, though I must live within you. I am not you. I disown you now, and still seek the stars, bask in the affection of loved ones, and laugh at death encroaching. Now, the second one is entitled Garage Sale, and the backdrop of this, I believe, is that her beloved late husband, Nathan Lupu, was an accomplished composer, mainly for solo piano. garage sale. You are gone forever now, and traces of our life together are leaving one by one. The piano lid is closed, and the sheets of your music composed through the decades are given away. Loneliness penetrates the house. Now I must leave it and seek some empathy with others who also close that chapter of their lives and come to this elegant place. But beauty is not enough when the heart still lingers in the past. Regina Lupu, we love her. Retelling Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday on the Christian calendar marks the entry of Jesus and his disciples into Jerusalem, bringing a movement to a head, a climax to conflict, to death and resurrection. His career began in the safer environment of the small villages, ringing the Galilean shores, which is in the north of modern Israel, almost to the Lebanon border. Traditionally, Christian churches hand out palms. The day is interpreted as a parade. Churches often held parades on the Palm Sundays of the last century. In one of my churches, the people asked me, "Please don't ask us to walk around the block waving palm branches." Apparently, my predecessor did. But here, wouldn't that bring us some much-needed press? A book by Marcus Borg and John Crossan, two New Testament scholars and members of the famed and to many infamous Jesus Seminar, put Palm Sunday in a new light for me. The book is called The Last Week. Both these scholars have written up Jesus elsewhere as a revolutionary, reforming Jewish peasant, radical in the sense of getting to the root of Judaism. From this book, The Last Week, I got three big ideas of such moment to me that I have to pass them on. Incidentally, I saw a poster a while back that said, "Big people talk about big ideas. Medium people talk about things like cars, shoes, basketball games. Little people talk about other people." Something like that, mind size, is attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, a great woman to talk about. Parenthetically, signs that America, our America, is coming back. March basketball madness and gun madness. Reports of our nation in widespread PTSD. And will we do any better now with gun slaughters? I remember mentioning to Lori a year ago, well, quarantined at least, we aren't hearing about mass murders every week. Well, now we are again. The first dynamite idea of Borg and Crossan, the God of Judaism and of Christianity, primarily wants justice more than worship. That's a lot more than a matter of emphasis. It means two great world religions have shifted or blunted the heart of their divinity and relegated that to the work of a committee. Whom can we get to work on social justice issues? Not the obligation of every member. The emphasis on worship is a misdirection, a missing of the point. The prophets of ancient Israel were thought to speak for God. God had their ears and used their mouths. I shudder when I hear modern religious ears and mouths claim to speak for their Almighty. This is what God thinks, OMG. But they did, the prophets of ancient Israel, they did. and they were often reviled for it because they said uncomfortable things, disquieting things. We say, metaphorically, of course, from God's lips to our ears or something like that. They were speaking truth to power, and power doesn't want to hear it. The ancient prophets claimed to hear the deity say, "I hate, I despise your feasts." A modern book based on those old prophets was titled "The Noise of Solemn Assemblies." Old Amos said something like, "God is tired of your worship, but let justice roll like waters." And Amos and his type were called "you troublers of Israel." I suspect that seeded the John Lewis phrase, "good trouble." Remember, during the Vietnam War, the president and family went out to church service and got scolded. And all of a sudden, the White House got a chapel and ministers got invited in, and the president didn't have to risk the scold. My colleagues and I used to ask each other, "Got your chapel invite to speak yet?" Even the old kings of Israel had their own house prophets, the comforting kind. The Palm Sunday story is that Jesus entered the temple, the Vatican of Jerusalem, and there he overturned the money changers' tables and declared, "You have turned a house of prayer into a den of thieves." The standard interpretation of that, what I learned in seminary and repeated for decades, was he was challenging the activity of the money changers as theft. The money changers who sat at table in the lobby to catch and sell to pilgrims on their way into temple. We were taught they were overcharging the pilgrims, the foreigners who came to the temple, overcharging for the purchases they made for sacrifice, pigeons or something. Whenever we go abroad, I hate to exchange currency while I'm traveling for fear of being overcharged, cheated. So ahead of time, I go to my local Bank of America where I can be sure of being overcharged for the foreign currency. But it's so much more comforting to be robbed American. Borg and Crossan say the standard story has missed the point. When Jesus says, "You have made the temple into a den of thieves," the point is not the thievery on the way into the temple. The missed point is in the word den. The word in Hebrew, den, means where you go for safety, for refuge, for escape, when you have done your robbery somewhere else. It's not the money changers who are the robbers. To me, the bombshell idea here, blasphemous in its time to get one crucified, is the declaration that we are thieves if we make accumulation and not sharing the center of our lives. The minor prophet Micah had asked, "What does the God of the Jews require?" Justice. And justice means nobody takes more than he or she needs, and what we need has to take into account what others are living without. And if we can end that soul searching and honesty with, well, that's their fault. They are takers and we are makers. Well, a radical prophet type might be called for. So we can disagree about what our faith community can do about it, what our local community can do about it, and our state reps and national reps. Worship is only valid, say the prophets of Israel, if it reflects the drumbeat, the heartbeat of the divine force of religion. Forget about justice, and you have shut down your deity. Well, IRS Day is coming soon, though there is a month delay. It's a bit like a day of atonement for me in reverse. I always want to be honest with the IRS so I don't hear from them again until next year. But it's a troubling soul day because I have to admit my concern and potential outrage end with what I have to pay in taxes. I need that neon light, sharing, not accumulation. Their second big idea to me, Jesus would have died many deaths in spirit if he knew that the movement that claimed him, Christianity, became a hurdle, a torment that the Jews had to survive and barely did. He was Jewish, fiercely Jewish, and if anything, he wanted Judaism to be true to its roots. He engaged fellow Jews all through his ministry. There was no animosity in him toward his fellow Jews. The Romans put him to death in the Roman way, crucifixion. The gospel writers wrote up the Jews as responsible because they didn't want to write up and anger the Romans. They were trying to get a footing in the Roman Empire. It wouldn't have helped to say the Roman governor did it, but can we now be accepted as a legit religion? The antagonism that developed between his Jewish followers who wanted to make him Messiah and those who couldn't see it became a tragic, long history of fratricide. Nothing like that antagonism was in Jesus. He engaged with his fellow Jews like a rabbi as long as he could. The write-up of his crucifixion was weighted against the Jews and for the Romans. If you read the Gospel of Matthew, that the crowd of Jews yelled, this is the Jews looking at the crucifixion. They are said to yell, "His blood be on us and on our children." You don't need to think too hard to realize what parents would say, you can condemn our children for what we did. In the gospel, a fabrication that defies any sense. It was written to make someone responsible for a death who wasn't. At the heart of a scripture I love is a fatal fratricidal bias and deceit. Parenthetically again, if you saw that Mel Gibson disaster of a movie, The Passion of the Christ, you probably didn't, but I felt I had to go. In the crowd cheering the drawn-out, agonizing death, cheering women are holding babies, and the babies are given AV-altered demonic faces. Disgusting anti-Semitism. Finally, these two authors point out that his entry on a donkey from the east side of Jerusalem was to counter the simultaneous or frequent regal royal entry from the west side by the Roman governor. So it was kind of a protest or alternative power parade. What was the alternative? The entry was a protest march for his time. And the point, there is another power coming. He called it the kingdom, the reign of God. Not a place to go when we die, but a rule of life while we live. Justice, sharing. Your needs are as important as mine. We don't know exactly what he meant by all his talk of a different kingdom or rule to live by. He probably showed his meaning By the table fellowship he gathered around him. It was an inclusive table fellowship. His society had strict definitions of who was clean and who was unclean, and you held that strictly by your practice of hospitality. He did not. His inclusive table fellowship was the only image we can figure for what he meant by an alternative kingdom. And 2 millennia later, 2,000 years later, circles of included and excluded, who can be a member and who cannot, who can be a clergy and who cannot, and who can marry and who cannot. Such issues are still breaking up denominations who claim his name and spirit, and they should. The closing hymn is number 7, The Leaf Unfurling. You may not know it, but it's the words that grab me. Bruce will now sing The Leaf Unfurling. In a moment, Bruce will play the postlude, and please plan to stay for our meeting following that. But before that, Pam will extinguish the chalice after these closing words. Every age needs to hear truth to power. This comforting truth to those who look to religion only for comfort. But being able to hear the truth brings comfort too.
Amen.